From Marines to Madonna, Todd Fox, predicting the most recognizable names in the world. Author, owner, expert. Tourprediction.com. Sorry, I've always wanted to do that since I saw Jeremy Clarkson. So in this podcast episode, I interviewed Todd Fox, executive security expert, owner of tourprediction.com and author of Underpinning, Protective Perspective, Protection for and from Humanity, Modern Survival Strategies, and All Access, The Secrets of Tour Security. Awesome 4 books that I'll be getting, so check them out. We discussed his role in providing protective security for entertainers and government officials, particularly in foreign environments. Todd emphasized the challenges of educating his clients about real threats, the importance of a layered security approach, and the need for adaptability and close protection. The conversation also covered application or non-application of jiu-jitsu in combat, sensory training, and the necessity of realistic law enforcement training. There's a vast difference between combat sports with a referee and combat with real violence. Todd shared his experiences transitioning from the military to entertainment security and his efforts between those times to update SWAT training. A truly enlightening conversation with a true warrior monk, a man who's gone from being a crayon-eating Marine to being able to communicate effectively with and successfully protect some of the most recognizable names on the planet. You can find Todd at tourprotection.com. The link is in the show notes. On Insta at Tour Training, and again, the link is in the show notes there. And the best one is his full link tree, and link is in the show notes, or Tour Protection after link tree as well. Thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former New Zealand Special Forces operator, subject matter expert from hownottodie.com.au. And you're listening to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by these guys, mystate.com, the ultimate daily formula for optimum hormone health, stress management, energy, and performance. 100% natural and clinically proven ingredients, it provides everything you need to raise your game in a convenient, gut-friendly capsule. Links for my former shows are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to my guest this morning, all the way from the USA, Todd Fox. Great to have you on.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, it was really cool chatting just before. You know, I love having a chat with a guest prior and then getting to know them through the show. So prior to this, the listeners and the viewers have already heard the show notes read by me. But, you know, you're an author. You're a founder, author of the book Underpinning and founder of Tour Protection. But I'd rather get it from your words, because I've had intros and it's horrible and probably don't even get my name right. So I got that part right. But Todd, tell me about and tell the viewers about what you do now and what you wrote, and then we're going to go back and how the hell you sort of got there.
Sure. So obviously you got my name right. It's a pretty easy one. You can't screw that up. But so I run a company that does protective security, and 80% are entertainers. So when a film company is going to shoot part of their film in a foreign country like Libya or you name it, they hire us to go basically do the recce, do the reconnaissance, set everything up. We set up an infrastructure, right? So airfields, we talk about hotels, talk about like where they're actually going to shoot, local security force, like a local guard force, vehicles. We train our guys up to whatever our standards are, basic standards for that particular group. We secure arms legally, stuff like that. And then we start to receive the client, and then we are with them 24/7 with that security posture. And then we get them out of country, and then we break down the structure that we built up, and then we deal with obviously the financial side of that. But that's what we do. 80% entertainment. So music tours are a really big part of our business. We do a lot of arena and stadium tours around the globe with some very big names. And then 20% is governmental. A lot of our governmental stuff is training, some protection, and then a small percentage of executives. That's probably the smallest bit of our business.
Wow, man, that sounds like it has a potential to go horribly wrong, and it's also exciting at the same time. I think Ollie Ollerton, one of the guests, talks about being comfortable in chaos. Really interesting. You know, we're gonna push on to the book later on, but with that sort of background, is there anything that's gone wild that you can talk about? What's the sort of threats out there
Eh,
that actually do present?
Yeah. Yeah. So the problems typically come from inside for most of what we're dealing with, but the biggest problem that we face is when we have people that don't understand the particular threat and the threat that the environment faces because they live in a bubble. And on the entertainment side, you know, they're very open and they think that the world is a nice place and nothing's going to hurt them, and that whatever exists in their little realm in the Hollywood Hills is the same when you go to Africa or South America or Southeast Asia. And so it's very difficult to explain to them, to articulate to them, and present to them material that they will digest. So I can write up, like a crime and safety type report and give them, all this data and all the information. And I can even give them videos and photos, but it doesn't sink in, right? Because they've never really experienced that. And they are used to a world of make believe, right?
Yeah,
So everything they
no
do is
comprehension of that real world.
no. And so they can't really take in what you're saying. And therefore, when you get there, there are a host of problems. But the posture that we need versus the posture that they'll allow, um, they're not in alignment all the time. So we have to do a lot of very low pro things, even beyond what the client understands is occurring, to ensure that they're safe and they can do these movements. And usually when we face problems, it's because they don't understand this, right? They have no ability to do a risk assessment. And, there may or may not be certain activities that they're partaking in that affect their state of minds and they make bad decisions. So
Mm.
that has put us in a few spots where we've had people taken hostage, and that never works out very well. We've been lucky so far. We're still, at no lives lost, but the problems that come from that are vast. So, the last problem we had was on the border of Russia with a client who decided to do his own thing and work out his own deal with basically a warlord that had left during the Balkans War, and started doing these promotions, these events, and so it was a cash deal. And when it went sideways, thankfully. I don't know if you know this, but at the U.S. embassies, the Marines guard the internal aspects of the embassy. It's called MSG duty, Marine Security Guard duty. So I was lucky enough to have a contact at the closest embassy who then had a relationship with a federal law enforcement agency in that kind of quasi country. And I was able to get information and work out a deal. And in the end of the day, we all ended up leaving very fast and somebody else's plane. But yeah, it happens. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Look, I mean, I've been involved with different entertainment sort of industries through the time, but Chili Palmer was a guest on the show, which was an absolute honor. And as the listeners might know, he worked on the movie Extraction, Extraction 2, and The Grey Man. And you're talking different countries there, but um,
Mhm.
it's interesting. You're providing tour entertainment, you're providing protection for the whole thing as an entity, but you got an actual Delta Force guy in there doing that. Must be nice to come across professionals inside that as well that do fully understand where you're posturing and where your needs are at as well.
Yeah, sometimes we get really good guys, and those are the guys that you maintain the relationship 10, 20, 30 years indefinitely. And you'll have exchanges, they'll come to your country and you'll take care of them, you put them in your house and you'll feed them and you'll take them around, show them the states and do stuff with them, and vice versa. But I would say by and large, that's rare, right? We run across a lot of people with limited access to training, and maybe they're big and they're bald and they have tattoo sleeves and they play the role and the client buys it. And
Yeah.
so we get a lot of that. So we have to filter through people and kind of have layers of access, just like you'd compartmentalize information with a governmental body. So same kind of thing. I was lucky enough, you talk about films overseas. I was lucky enough to be the technical advisor on the Born Identity. So that
Oh
was
wow.
one of the cool projects that we got to work on, but I didn't get to work on it as security. I worked on it as a TA. And that was really, really cool. That was in Prague, where most of the scenes that we were involved in were shot.
Oh, awesome. It's funny that you mentioned the sleeved up bald guy because that's actually was in my transition question and then onto your book because I think it's really organic way to get there. Just the other day, I think on one of the UK Special Forces pages that I was honored to have interviewed me on, they had a couple of air quotes that are only listening to it, bodyguards, and they're huge black guys. They must weigh like 200 kilos, bald, as you said, shades. And you and I know that's very different. That's a physical presence, as you said, and maybe a visual presence. But you see that a lot. So let's talk about the difference between close protection, which most people know as bodyguarding, and then that big, huge behemoth guy. The skill difference, the difference between fighting and real bodyguarding, the difference between posturing and actual close protection. Let's sort of jump off there as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned the UK, and so I was lucky to work with some of their guys in 4-2 Commando, some Marines there that were great guys. I don't know any of the Army side of the house, but the Marines were great guys to work with. They drink like fish. I couldn't keep up with those guys there, but training wise, we were good to go. So a lot of their CP guys, or close protection guys, end up coming from doors, the bouncers at clubs. So they tend to be bigger guys, ethnic guys, or black guys are pretty common. And you don't get a lot of guys who kind of take a more layered security approach, right? So it's just confrontation based. I'm going to intimidate you, and if that doesn't work, we're going to be in a fight,
Yeah.
and that's it. But from our side of things, we deal with a lot of layers, right? And we also know that we're representing a client, and we don't have anything relative to what the client has. So, the money's going to come out of the pocket of the client, not our company, and not me individually, not so much. So we create this posture, right, through having these layered approaches. So we don't ever want that thing to happen, right?
No.
Our goal is to prevent it from ever happening, not to be there to kind of start it or to handle it. We actually want to evac. If something happens, our goal is to GTFO and get out. And then we would have a cover man that would, put fire on somebody. But our main goal around the principle is evac, right? So we send most of our meat to the principal, and then as little as possible to deal with the threat, right? Because that's where we want to protect. So what we do is we put into place a simple system, a layer security approach that we use would be to deter people from doing something. Sometimes that's through having these layers, not knowing when we're coming and going, changing vehicles, changing, what the principal's wearing, showing up at irregular times, things like that. Then we want to be able to detect something that's occurring. So we're going to have people out there in plain clothes, working lines, working around the perimeter, seeing what's going on and trying to pick out anomalies from the baseline of normalcy and
Mm,
say, oh, that's a problem, potentially watch that further, analyze it, even go make contact in some cases. And then the next thing is, we try to create these mechanisms that delay any type of onset of an attack. So if something happens, they've got to go around a serpentine pattern, or they've got to go through these layers of doors or through these security checkpoints. And the more layers there are, the less likely it is that they'll be successful in their attack. And then if that fails or it starts to fail, then we get into the response mechanism. And then we have a mitigation strategy for that, whether it's in dealing with the outcome of what you've done physically, or the financial side of it. So you have lawyers and you have managers and you have accountants that are in on that plan with us, where we said, hey, if this thing occurs, it's going to cost this and that. Or even it could be something like a KNRE policy, and you're in a foreign country where kidnapping and extortion and ransom happen frequently, and we have that in place, and we know who our negotiator is going to be and
yeah.
how that's going to unfold. So this is referred to for us as a layered security approach, and that's what we put into play. And that deals with everything from flights and hotels and cars, to training up local forces, to uh, making relationships at restaurants, making relationships at public venues, knowing players on the ground and how you can get stuff done and move things around. In the US, for example, if it's government, you cannot use bribes. You can't do any type of government business using bribes, but they'll call it a facilitation fee. So now I'm moving from one place to another. We've had clients who want to go do a charity event in Iraq. And so I'm saying, okay, well, we're not going to Baghdad. I'll take you to Erbil. And when we get you to Erbil, we'll move and do, we'll collect the people. Like, just give you a random example. We had this Syrian refugee that this client wanted to meet with and have this thing, and they want to go to Syria. Say, no, we're not going to Syria. That's not happening. We'll keep you in northern Iraq. We'll go collect them from Al Hasaka, bring them back to Erbil. You have the meeting, then we'll take them back again. And so you have to kind of find a way through these problems that you
Yeah.
get with the people that we deal with. So that's a very quick kind of down and dirty as to what we do, and the general mindset of what we're doing.
You explained it really well, Todd, and you talked really a lot at the time there about just changing someone's mind. It's really, that's a paraphrase of what you talked about, changing that bad guy's mind or bad person's mind, to hopefully not get to that hands-on. And that's the last thing any bodyguard wants. I remember Gary Fahey, a friend who was a guest on the show. He runs Strongmen. He used to be the head of the Australian Prime Minister's close protection team. He stated their job was really to run and hide. Very broad from a very manly man saying that. And yeah,
Yeah,
you
sure.
might have guys putting cover fire down, or a barrier of people covering,
Mhm.
but really the job, just like you see in the, and I'm talking to the crowd now, the listeners, just like you see the president of the United States is evacuated out, the job is
Mhm.
to run and hide, not to be in the fight. You don't want your principal to be in that fight at all, and we want to avoid it as much as you can.
Yeah,
And most
anybody
of
that
what you're
knows their
saying there,
job would say that
yeah,
100%.
yeah, they would, but that's not the glamour. And most of it
No.
is this. Most of it is being able to talk your way out of it, and talk ahead of the game as well.
Yeah, or to have some type of foresight as to what is likely to occur. And part of that for us, for example, is personality profile, really understanding how that principal thinks and what they're likely to do in a given environment, and then be able to predict with some degree of certainty what you can do to offset that, right? So it's like almost equation manipulation where you're moving around variables
Yeah,
because that's how you can produce the best outcome.
yeah, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Look, you've really summed up where you're at now, which is great. And also, I got to say, pretty high end from a Marine. And we're going to go to the Marine side of things later on. Sorry, I had to throw it out there. Um,
Thanks.
no problem.
I'm gonna eat some crayons when I get done with this interview.
There we go. We're keeping the appearance up. That's really cool. Is that what brought you to write the book Underpinning? I'm guessing you've got a lot of tools in the toolbox now to be able to teach to others. Let's talk about this book and what it's about and what made you actually write a book.
So I've written 5 books, and Underpinning is the current one. Underpinning really deals with my other backgrounds, right? Outside of the Marine Corps, outside of close protection, which is in law enforcement. So
Mm,
one of the things, that happens now is that we have this thing with jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, MMA, guys wanting to teach law enforcement. Now, I don't know that it's happening to the degree elsewhere that it is in America, but it's a big deal. Like now it's a feather in your cap to say that you teach or train law enforcement. And I have a bunch of black belts, and I used to fight MMA professionally, and I still am training, competing in jiu-jitsu. But I couldn't disagree with them more because what they're doing is something that's unrealistic for these guys. Guys need to train jujitsu. It's great for cops, but they need to train it in context. And so this book was a way to look at the laws, the statutes, the agency policy, what society says and does, and then how the tactics change and the theories and the processes and how things work. So this book basically explains to average everyday people or guys who are martial arts instructors to police how to look at that particular equation. So in our case, we're fighting normally with a duty belt on, right? And on that duty belt, you have a gun, you have spare ammo, you have a taser, you have pepper spray, you have an ass baton, you have a bolo, you have all of these things on that waistline. And the more things that you have under stress, the less likely you are to make the right choice. It's too many things to cycle through. So we talk about that in terms of Hick's law. The Hick's law explains that great. And so that's a piece of the book. We talk about the environmental changes, right? So if I'm wrestling with you and you're my friend and we're wrestling on a mat for points or position or control, that's great. That's something. That's physical fitness and agility and maybe some intensity and maybe there's some variability in that. And that's awesome. But in the real world, where the fights occur is on concrete, on a car, against a brick wall, two people on one. So, the engagement doesn't unfold the same way it does in sports. And so this book was really important for me so that I can give guys an understanding. So your default is always going to be to protect whatever it is that you do. Like, no, 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 jujitsu is a solution, or no, 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 Muay Thai is a solution. And this book basically says, yeah, those are great things. And I think those are two of the best things for cops to learn. But they have to learn it in context with the law, with the agency policy, with the kit on that they're going to be wearing, with the environments that they're going to be in, and with the scenarios. So, situationally driven, right? What are they going to face? We know they're going to have to put cuffs on people. So I've never put cuffs on people as a jiu-jitsu guy. I put cuffs on people as a cop, but not as a jiu-jitsu guy. I score points in jiu-jitsu, or I get a submission, somebody taps. That doesn't happen. I can't tap out in a fight. So, when I'm doing Muay Thai, I'm wearing boxing gloves, and no one on the street that I've ever fought has worn boxing gloves. So all of these artificial things like referees and soft mats and time limits and weight limits and divisions, that's not how it unfolds on the street. And so I think the ideas, the concepts of angles and leverage and all these principles of fighting hold true in all conditions, but you got to add some additional context to it to make it realistic for the end user, right? And you can do that safely if you do it right.
That's really insightful, raw, but also agnostic, I'd suggest, Todd. I didn't come into that question that I asked you about your book, Uneducated. We just published a show with the Delta 3, the sequel. And in that, I asked them that exact question. And you're talking about one of them, Bob Keller, he's got over 1,000 direct action hits, or those are fancy words for the listener. He's gone on into gunfights. And they are jiu-jitsu guys. They do that with Delta Force and in the special forces before that. But they don't use that when they're in there. And you talked about a duty belt with a cop. And here and in New Zealand and over your way, you've also got a bit of body armor on as well. Even with that, it's hard to manipulate your body around into those arm bar positions and things. However, I did also have a conversation again with Michael Don Vito, 5th degree jiu-jitsu black belt. I know he's got a ton of other ones as well. And his statement to me was the self-defense side of jiu-jitsu is from the 1980s. It has not evolved. What I believe, and this is my belief from speaking to so many different people, is a special forces guy or a high-end SWAT guy or a veteran police officer who then goes and does jiu-jitsu, it actually gives it context, and they're the guys that are championing it. This is going to turn into a question. And then they go, oh, jiu-jitsu is great, forgetting they went through selection, mindset, tenacity, and skill level, and then combat of some kind of massive stress inoculation, and then they added a skill of jiu-jitsu. My opinion is they're the ones championing it forwards when actually people need the how the hell to be in a actual fight confrontation and win. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack on that.
Sorry.
So first, no, it's good. If first you mention, different aspects of kit, and my kit on patrol was very different than my kit on SWAT because it put 6 inches between my chest and a suspect, whereas on patrol it would be like 2 inches, and that's a major difference when you're fighting somebody. Even getting into shooting platforms changes, right? So that's important to understand, but these guys don't get that, and they're not there yet. Another thing you talk about, you mentioned the last name Don Vito. Now, I don't know the name Michael Don Vito, but I know the name Ron Don Vito because he was the Marine Corps founder of a system called line training that we used to do back like in 1990, which was linear infighting neural override engagement. He was a big karate guy. That was his thing. So I don't know if they're related. I would assume they are.
It's his dad.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah. So Ron Don Vito was around during my time in the Marine Corps, and he was
Wow.
teaching his system line. And it was very different. It didn't have any aspects of jujitsu. And then you mentioned again in this same conversation that, the self-defense techniques are from the 80s. Well, I'll take one step further and say that you're right, the 80s, but more of the 1580s, because Brazilian jiu-jitsu uses Japanese jiu-jitsu as the self-defense system. So
Yes.
Brazilian jiu-jitsu is very different as it's ground-based. But the actual self-defense system that's taught by the Gracies is hundreds of years old, and it's Japanese jiu-jitsu that Count Maida brought to them in Brazil when he was leaving. He was fleeing because he had killed someone. So there's that. So when we talk about it in terms of mindset, I do think there's that where the guys that are doing it actively already have gone through these challenges and have been through gauntlets, and they have the right mindset to adapt it, whereas the average cop doesn't. But it does kind of breed a warrior spirit or ethos when you do start training this. So I think there's value in that. There's certainly value in the physical fitness side, but training their mind is probably the most important thing you can do, even more so than the body. But jiu-jitsu yields that physical aspect as well, and it conditions core more. So a lot of things that happen in any type of engagement that would occur happen core to extremity. That's how it typically unfolds, right? And so jiu-jitsu is perfect for that. There's nothing better. But they have to put it into context. And most cops, and I'm only speaking to Americans because I was one, most cops are too lazy to make the transition between what they're doing in a sport capacity and what they would be doing on the street. Because now I just took 2, 3, 4, 6 hours of whatever training. Now I got to go back, unpack that, readjust that. I have to pressure test it to see how it works in a car, not just with my kid on, but now like the person that I'm fighting is not gonna tap and I'm not gonna tap because I don't have that option. And now he's punching me in the face at the same time he's holding onto my gear, right? Maybe he strips off my body armor, pulls it up over my head, or he takes my gun out. So weapon retention is really a major aspect of training for military or law enforcement, or it should be if it's not. And that's pretty lacking as a broad stroke in jiu-jitsu. So that's another aspect we talk about for forever. All these different conditions that you would face are nothing like being in, a competition match or even training in a school. So my big thing is put it into context. I think it can work. I think it can work on a lot of different types of engagement. I'll give you an example of something that happened today. I was training a state group, a state police group, and we were talking about taking someone into custody. And we were talking about below the threshold of deadly force, right? So you cannot shoot somebody because they're not compliant. So we're talking about how we're taking 2 or 3 officers, and in this case, it happened to be a SWAT team, and controlling this person. And if we have a dog pile of officers, which I've seen internationally, they're trying to take this kid who is really small and wiry, and they can't do anything to him. He's fighting, but it's like 6 of them on top of him. Whereas if they had 2 guys with a strategy, right? I'm going to be high. I'm going to be low, left and right. One's cover, one's contact, one's going to move in first. And he's looking for very specific stuff, looking at the waistline, assessing it a certain way, getting his grip points in a certain way, expecting the guy is going to fight. The other guy's coming at another angle, all these different mechanics. And then where do I want to move him? Do I want to put him prone? Do I want to put him supine? Do I want to put him on his side? That would change if I saw a gun or a knife or some type of weapon, or if I had already in the, going into the clinch had cleared his waistline, and then am I stepping in on a side where my gun's exposed? I don't want to feed my gun to the bad guy, right? So all these little things that we do, we have to think about, because what I do in jiu-jitsu is not what I would do on the street. For example, if I'm right-handed and I'm grabbing the head with the right hand, I'm doing something like a jiu-jitsu sweep, and my gun side is being fed to right where the hand of the suspect is. So it doesn't work out well. But in order to know that, I have to actually go train this with kit on concrete. Half of the, no, I shouldn't say half, 70% of the takedowns that I do not work on the street, not because they don't work, but if I did them, I will bust up my knees in the process. Now, yeah. And then if my hands are behind the guy and he's 200 pounds and he falls on top of my hands on concrete, it's probably going to disable my hands to some degree, or at least reduce my capabilities. And I don't want my capabilities diminished in a fight on the street. So there are all these factors that aren't discussed, that aren't talked about. And I think in large part it's because you champion the thing you do. So whatever you do is the thing. And no one wants to say, yeah, there are weaknesses, there are flaws. And that's kind of where we're at right now with jiu-jitsu, because there's this separation that's occurring where it's like, yes, I do traditional jiu-jitsu, which would be classic BJJ. Yes, I compete in that for points or submission, whatever. But then I also do this other thing over here, and I'm training that thing, and we're talking about that thing, and there's a curriculum and a program for that thing. And it hurts. It doesn't feel good. And I lose sometimes, and I get shot with ammunition sometimes, and I get hit with shock knives sometimes. It sucks. And I know I'm weak. But I have to accept that if I want to get better. And that's where there's this line, because it hurts, because it takes time, because there are injuries sometimes. People are like, yeah, I'll just stick to the mats and this conventional kind of approach.
I think it's really important to realize the classic quote of, if all you have is a hammer, all you see is a bunch of nails. I love what I was taught in the unit, and before I was taught that before by the same guy, for our UNDER. We call it CQB in America. CQB is different, but it's basically armed and unarmed combat. And it was a bit of everything. The footwork, I think, is some form of a jiu-jitsu / aikido. The chops is World War II sort of things. If we're going to do a takedown, it's what we do is a chin jab with a trip rather than turning your back on someone, which you could get stabbed in the back. But they're tools, not rules. I love what you've spoken about with context, and I want to touch on two things I've written down there. You spoke about referee. There's no referee and there's no tap out. Again, in my opinion, but further, it's been proven, particularly by the two MMA professional fighters. One was put in a coma by seven scumbags. There was actually a female that put him in a coma. She put a 2x4 across his head. When you fight in a jiu-jitsu competition, you've got three people in the ring. Even when I say to people, how many people are fighting? Sorry, how many people are in there? They go, two. I go, are you sure? Hang on. They're actually training themselves to discount the other human walking around, or UFC, whatever you want to say, as you were saying you're an MMA fighter. If you discount the other person walking around, you'll do that on the street. You need to keep your eye open, because how many times, Todd, when you're a patrol officer, was there more than one guy there, more than one bad guy? It's not always just a
All
one-off,
the
is it?
time, every day. Yeah, every
Yeah.
day.
So situation awareness is key, and that referee detrains you, which is terrible. The flip side of that is, again, back in our day, I'll say, Dwayne Dieter, a unarmed combat and armed trainer for the Navy SEALs, SEAL Team 6, and a bunch of other people as well. His story, his claim to fame, literally was he would get in fights in bars. His sensei would take him to bars, and he was great at it. One time, he was crossing the crosswalk, waiting at the for the lights to change in the middle of the day, like I'll say Sunday, totally inert, and some guy tries to swing at him, and he didn't do anything that he'd trained in for years. He just did something that worked. And from that, he developed the hood drill. He realized that, hang on a sec, it's not the skill, it's the context, your words. And these things don't happen, right, Todd, let's fight. Bang, bang, bang. The bad guy, he's waiting for the his moment to take your head off. So it comes as a surprise. And that's how you must train if you want to survive a confrontation, under surprise, between the cars. You said fighting in your car.
Yeah. So again, you're talking about a lot of different things, and we're kind of talking over the same material in different sort of ways.
Yeah.
But, when we talk about martial arts, I think people lack an understanding of where the art is and where the science is. And I don't think you can be dogmatic about it. I think that's problematic, and it stunts your growth if you're dogmatic. Like, this is the only way. There's so many different ways to solve so many different problems. And when you stick to just one ideology, it never works out well in the long run, especially if you're exposed to really nasty situations frequently. So, um, for me, when I talk about martial arts or martial sciences, I think about the sciences have not changed. And what I mean is the way your body moves, the way your arms fold, the compression of your carotids, that hasn't changed in tens of thousands of years. And so I know how your body can and can't move. That's the same. So I can attack the same weaknesses with the same strengths in my bodies. The art is how I trick you, how I set you up. That is the art of trickery, right? Of subterfuge, of what I make you think and what I make you do mistakenly, and how I manipulate you, right? That's the art component for me. You talk about Dieter. I met him in the 90s in Coronado Island. And I will say that I can't report being a fan of anything that he was teaching in the way of techniques,
Mm-hmm.
but I will say that his hood drill, so they used to have a box that came down, it had four sides and a top to it, and it would come down and go over you. I think that was critical for the military, critical for law enforcement. We use it to this day. And I would say the reason that it works so well is that people don't understand the sensory aspects of fighting. And when you have some type of tunnel vision or completely blind with this hoodwink, when you have auditory exclusion, when you can't breathe now because you're not getting full breaths, you have these shallow breaths and they become more rapid. When you start to lose fine motor skills, all these things change. So me and you talking now while we're relaxed and calm is very different than when there's a sort of engagement and you have an adrenaline dump, some type of adrenal response. Even if you've done it a million times, you're still going to get that to some degree. So that hood drill was really, really beneficial. And for that, I think that, his contribution was amazing. I don't want to say anything bad about the guy at all, but that hood drill was far more important than the actual techniques that he was teaching. And I think to this day, it's super useful. When we just finished, oddly enough, yesterday, we were using the hood the same way. And, we had people who had never had that type of experience, that sensory experience. And when the hood comes off and the fight starts and they didn't know where it was coming from, they didn't know what it was going to be, their response and their ability to try to kind of draw some type of recognition prime decision making where it's like, what have I done that's similar to this? Oh, shit. And they're already behind the power curve on their heels. Instead of going right into action because you knew it was going to happen, you knew how it was going to happen, you knew where it was going to come from. So a lot of times you are ambushed, and when you're ambushed, you don't have the ability to know that. Now, there's the flip side of that, which is that with humans, we have a lot of like pre-attack indicators and cues that we do with our body mannerisms and where we're looking and how we're touching things like, grooming gestures and tensing of the fist and blading of the body and all these other things too. So as a cop, you hear a lot of times it came out of nowhere, and that's just not true. It didn't come out of nowhere. You just missed all of the cues that led up to that thing. So there are two sides to that. But if you're training hard and you're training right, you can adapt quickly, right? And so there was a guy named Dr. Klein that wrote a book he wrote many books on this subject, which were based on this recognition prime decision making, which we talk about in my book, because that's so critical to have these neurons connecting with the synapse. So if you have something similar to what you've dealt with before, your recall is much quicker, which means your reaction is quicker. And the thing that people don't understand that don't work in the military or law enforcement is, especially law enforcement, the bad guy picks the time, they pick the place, and they pick the method of attack, and you're left with the response to it. Action is always faster than reaction. So now you're behind the power curve. They've just controlled 75% of the equation when you think about ambushes, and you get 25, but your 25 kicks in after they've initiated their 75, right? That's no good. That's bad math.
Yeah, it's amazing the synergy that's going on here, because I go into a show getting to know a guest, and one of our caveats, the first rule is there's no rules teaching how not to die, but you assume your attack is bigger, faster, stronger, more skilled, armed, has a pre-plan. They're just that, as you said before, we're saying the same thing in different ways. That person picked you because therefore he thinks you're smaller, weaker, slower, less skilled, not armed, and don't have a pre-plan. The bad guy does pick it. And gosh, particularly for a female, it's got to be an ambush attack. That's the whole reason they're doing it. And what you said about Dwayne Dieter and the Navy SEALs, everybody else has said the same thing. That one thing he did, the hood drill, served us right for everything, because you need to be inoculated, and a real word is exposed to that. Just like the guests that we've had on, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, Tony Blair, but then to the body language stuff, that's worst case scenario. I work worst case scenario backwards, the hood drill. Everything's turned to absolute porridge. You didn't see everything. And fear, let's be real, fair enough you didn't see everything, Todd, because you're a busy mom, busy dad, you're doing this, you're getting them into the car. Fair enough sometimes. You can't be the bodyguard all the time. But if we can give, Todd, by reading your book, by listening to one thing you've said, if we can give somebody just one more file in their brain that, oh, this has happened, I remember this thing, that puts them upwards on that power curve, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's my goal. I think that's a lot of our objectives. We want to make society better and we want to make them safer, good people safer. And to your point, a lot of the people that are committing these crimes, where are they coming from? They're coming out of prison where they were lifting weights, where they're being aggressive, where they're learning these techniques. While you are thinking about, oh, I just want to take care of my family. I just want to do the right thing. I want to abide by the law, make enough money to have my house, my food, my clothes. and you're thinking about staying in your lane, and this person who's attacking you has no rules, and they're not thinking about that. They're thinking like a savage, and it's very hard to address that in a polite and professional sort of manner. You need to have violence as one of the solutions, and you have to train it, and you have to train it in the conditions where it's most likely to happen. So, I think training is huge, and I don't just say that. I'm still training. I still go to courses. If I go to a course and it's a 80-hour course, it's 2 weeks, and I pick up 2 or 3 things, it's a win for me. I may know 95% or 99% of the material, but there's a new thing where it changes the way I think about something or process something, and I can then impart that to somebody else. It's of value. And as
Absolutely.
you know, it never ends. It never ever ends. Things constantly are evolving and changing, and somebody has a different look at something or a different way of saying it, and it literally can change the entire paradigm for you.
I love that you said a different way of saying it because, the things you said have been said before by other people in parts of what they're teaching. But sometimes it's the communication, that let's be airy fairy. It's when you're ready to receive the message, you hear the message. But sometimes it's just the right person. I, I communicate with a former Green Beret just every day. And it's hilarious. He sends me a message and it's, God damn it. I've tried to teach my wife this stuff for 20 years and all she does now is watch your videos. We're both laughing, going, that's brilliant because she's taken a step forwards, but 20 years, she wasn't ready for that message.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is a lot of times, whether you're talking about a wife or your kids, they're not going to hear it from you the same way because they see you in a different light, and they don't understand that you may be a subject matter expert, you may have the most experience in that field, but they see you in whatever capacity it is, husband, father, whatever it may be. So they're
Mm,
not ready to listen to it at that time, but also they're not ready to listen to it from you. And in the end, we all have egos and we all have this thing, but our objective is met. So if you find somebody that's good that they'll listen to, great. Hey, take them and run with it. They're giving you good material. I just want you to grow. I want you to have that in your back pocket in case you need it someday. So that's a win for you.
absolutely. Look, I'm intrigued because you've told me you've written 5 books. That's really cool. I remember interviewing one, I think it was either a British Special Forces guy or an Australian Special Forces guy, but what the hell inspired you to write a book? It's a big deal, the first one. So you've written 5 books. Let's go through what they are and how you got into writing books.
Well, the only reason I'm not a writer, the only reason that I got into writing books is because nothing existed on the subject. So my very first experience in the entertainment side of close protection or tour security, I worked on a team where I was the only American, and I had a very specific background from the Marines as a professional fighter. And these guys, they gave me disinformation and misinformation. They didn't help me along the way at all. And so I know you come from teams, I come from teams, and we take junior guys and we bring them up and we help them and we show them the way. And we ride them hard and we give them shit, and it's hard for them, but they know with respect to systems and processes and all that stuff, that they're going to be led in the right direction. And I
Yeah.
had the opposite experience as a foreign national on this team, and I looked everywhere for the differences between like high risk security operations and executive protection. Very different worlds, right? So
Yeah.
the entertainment side does not use the same TTPs or processes or protocols as high risk. Entertainment's very soft, and their approach is much more like executive protection. So I looked everywhere. There was nothing. So the first thing that I thought after a couple of years of doing is I need to give people a general guide, like a primer almost, on what do you need to bring with you? How does it work? What are the people? Who are the people you're going to deal with, and what are their specific roles? What is your function? What are your objectives? What systems can you use, to ensure success? And what are the actual objectives? And what are the problems along the way? So I wrote that book in '07 ish. And I did that simply because after a number of years in the business, nothing existed. So it was intended as a primer. Um, and it got some good reception and bad. Some guys were like, oh, you can't tell this. The guys that said that were guys who didn't come from the military, they didn't come from law enforcement, they were not secret squirrels, but somehow they thought that they had something that nobody knew about, right? Like nobody can know this. And, the guys that are looking around like this before they tell you something, like, no, dude, people are way ahead of the curve on this one. Guys are doing really high speed stuff, and what you're doing is not that big a deal. So, I had mixed reviews on that. Now, a lot of people default to it as kind of the only and the best primer to go to relative to that one specific job. So that's how it started. And then once I figured out the process, I was able to replicate it for different things. I did one for a governmental entity, and it related to defensive tactics and use of force and things like that. And then I ended up doing one here, called Protection for and from Humanity. And this would be one that you're really familiar with, where it's basically an outline for everyday people on security. So you could give it to your family members and they could read through it. And a lot of it, like, what's the difference between the military and law enforcement and protection? What's the difference between security and protection, the mindset, situational awareness and the thinking and adaptability and foresight and environmental analysis and anomaly detection and establishing baselines. And so all of that stuff, how does the criminal think? What are they looking for when they're trying to find a target? And so that's all of this, and it gets into mostly soft skills, but then it gets into some of the hard skills. What do you need in the way of hard skills, and why do you need them, and what are the standards for it? So it talks about different processes and things like that, how to compartmentalize information, and who you should tell what to, and things like that. So that's a very broad stroke that I wrote because, as a guy that's dealing with a lot of high profile people, I get that, hey man, what should I do with this? And that's probably why you started what you actually do. I would think it's very similar in nature to kind of the end objective, which is training people up to protect their house, to protect their business, to protect their family members, protect themselves, give them some tools and ways to think about it. And so that book, Protection for and from Humanity, I think is still very palatable for every person on the planet because the systems work. If you put them in place, they work.
It's really interesting. People at our stage of life, I've said that a couple of times now.
Old dudes.
Yeah, exactly. Dan Cooper, Australian SAS, said the same thing. 10 years ago, you'd hold everything to your chest, but now we're going, we just want to share that experience and knowledge to good people, as was the caveat you said. So we'll start to wrap up. US Marine, and now you're at Tour Protection, and author of 5 books. What's the sort of journey, US Marine, MMA, and so on, the involvement? If we can paint a picture there, then I might ask a relevant question about military transition out to civilian.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep what I've been doing for quite some time with respect to tour protection and dealing with the movies, dealing with the music tours, dealing with those entities as well as the governmental aspect. And I'll keep what we have, but what we're really pushing to develop now is to kind of update the law enforcement side of things, in particular SWAT teams, but to update the way they're trained, the way they look at it, and how to do it safely, and then how to do it so that we don't have a conflict with administrations and governing bodies and things like that, because that's problematic. Guys with our backgrounds will go to train law enforcement and they don't understand the difference between rules of engagement and use of force. So I've been in the room where I've got an operator trying to teach police suppressive fire. Well, you can't have suppressive fire as a law enforcement officer. So they don't understand these differences. So because of those things, you have agencies or bodies that are very gun shy about adding realism to training. And so our mission now is to bring that realism to help them rewrite stuff. In the States, we have bodies like POST, Peace Officer Standards and Testing and Training. And basically, they govern what and how agencies train, not the agency itself, but it's a body that oversees the training, right? So they approve courses and they give so many credits, like continuing education credits, that the Leo must have in order to keep his license annually. So, if our post courses are approved and we're bringing it to them, that's one step, right? Then if we can show them videos where we trained a certain way and that agency went out there and did it and it cost them less money because they didn't have these lawsuits, some of the things that happen, really we can demonstrate how more force on the front end equals less force on the back end, right? If I just do this, it's a preemptive action and it looks bad initially, but you'll see in the end, no one dies, no one gets hurt. And this is the way forward, as opposed to, playing patty cake with them and then all of a sudden someone gets killed, right? Or you have someone who's never been punched in the face before, they're going to go to deadly force very quickly. So we have to inoculate them to these experiences, these sensory experiences, whether it's, through drills that we do that include the hoodwink, or, literally just doing some light boxing. So they're used to that feeling, go, oh, right, I don't like this, but it's not that big a deal. I can deal with this. I can fight on. I can push through this, and conditioning them mentally. So that's kind of where I'm at now. That's where our focus is. And then along the way, I'll still do some bits and pieces. And we didn't talk about this one. I was going to show you this one. This is Protective Perspective. And this
Wow.
book is the entertainment side, where it shows you behind the scenes of how we're implementing these specific security protocols on a world tour. And so I'll still do kind of some of those side project things, with books on entertainment related things. But our focus in the moment is underpinning, and it's use of force related in America, because, to be quite frank, we're not where we should be, and we've had a lot of setbacks in recent years, on the police side. And hopefully we can start to straighten those things out and give the good guys some tools, to police the communities for our families, and for us. And if you deploy overseas, the police are the ones protecting your family members. So it's important for me that these guys have a good set of skills that they can apply under stress, and that's my mission at the moment.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Really is. Uh, while you were saying that, and it's prior as well, I wrote down the movie 13 Hours from the book, and a reason I wrote that down is it dawned on me that we can start with soft skills like diplomatic protection. Hey, sir,
Mhm.
that's a dangerous place. We'll send some guys there. To hang on a sec. At the end, these guys were getting killed and shot by hundreds of bad guys with Toyota Hilux pickups with machine guns on them. There's a wide range there, but you need to be aware of it all. That was, yeah, that really stuck in my head, that that person with only law enforcement that isn't able to step up, because you can't step up above your level of training, just won't be able to do it, and it can go horribly wrong. And people died on that engagement. Hmm. Then I was also wondering, as my final question, you start off as a US Marine and you've gone up to this high end, which is completely different things. Like I said, you got some crayons for afterwards. Did you have to transition your mind out of the Marine and military mindset into this? I've spoken to a lot, Todd, and I'm not blowing
Yeah.
smoke. You're clearly well educated and a subject matter expert in what you do. So, how did you go from US Marine, a grunt, to this? And was there a transition also required
Yeah.
mental health wise?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something that I talked about this not long ago. There's a massive transition that occurs, and it's very, very hard. I still, to this day, after all these years, still have an issue with it, because we go from dealing with action consequence model, and then
Hmm.
we go into the make believe. And so I was taught and trained and functioned within action consequence. If I do X, then Y is going to happen, and Y can get me dead. So I don't want to do that. And so I will change everything I can to create a model that is functional in whatever environment. And it took me years to get used to working with and around and for people who don't have any consequence to their action. There's a yes man for everything. There's money to solve everything. And that was a hard transition. I think, not physically, because I went from, living in the dirt to living in, the Four Seasons, to flying, on a private jet on a Gulfstream G5. So that part is easy, but the trade-off is really not great. I mean, you get paid, but your enemies are not always in front of you, and this is problematic. And so the learning curve is super steep. On my end, I had to learn the hard way and have these experiences, and realize that my team is not the same as my team in the Marine Corps, that
Yeah.
the people that are supposed to be with me doing the right thing and would have my best interest at heart, and that's not the case. That's really not the case in entertainment. It's cutthroat, and you can't trust people. So those were challenges. I would say the greatest challenges that I faced, and then figuring out how to um, present ideas and concepts to them, not using military jargon or vernacular, in a soft
Exactly.
sell kind of way, talking to them. I had people tell me, don't make direct eye contact. It's intimidating. Or don't talk in that voice, meaning a man voice. So you lower your tone, talk softer, slower, don't say certain words, don't look in the eye, break eye contact frequently. And this is the opposite of the Marine Corps. I would think somebody is lying to me if they treated me that way. Whereas in
Yeah.
this realm, it's offensive to them if you do that. So a lot of things to learn along the way, a lot of adjustments. And then, like I said, I think now the most important thing is knowing how to deliver it to them in a way that they can hear it and digest it. And then they're capable of making the best decision for the best outcome, right? Not what's best for me, but what's best for the overall outcome. And so that's probably the most important thing in that transition from the Marine Corps to the entertainment side.
Goes back to what you said sort of 20 minutes ago. You're always learning. I'm just going to finish up back to what I was talking about, the training that you're doing for law enforcement, for police, which is brilliant because they're the ones. Let's be real. You don't pick up your phone and call the local crackhead from defund the police
Mm-hmm.
to come and save your wife. And it's Rick Hogg, and now the Delta guy, another guy on the show, and he did the same thing. He does, I think, Project Officer Survival. Now that's just survival. That's not how to go and do take down bad guys. That's how to keep yourself alive. And you, him, many other operators out there have realized that you've got a bunch of skills and it's lacking in law enforcement. Let's gift that to them. And in Rick's case, he does actually gift that to them, which is a charity. And it can only help form a community that's safer for us. And I just wanted to say, well done to you for identifying that, because we all want to go home safe. And I think it's a horrible thing. I was a police officer. I was a special forces operator. I'm a fireman now. At no time in the last two jobs I did as an SF guy, at no time in the last two jobs do I um, leave the house and don't think I'm going to come back. That's not fair because it's just a job. I swore my life to the Queen. That's fine. But I didn't do that for policing. I don't expect to come home in a casket. That's just wrong in my opinion. And no, nobody should have to go through that. So the things that you're doing, things that these other operators are doing to keep those cops alive is brilliant. And it's incumbent upon us, I would suggest, as I'm talking.
I would agree with you 100%. You're right. I feel that relationship with them, that camaraderie with them. Now you're operating as someone everyone loves as a fireman, and God bless you. You're a hose dragger now. Things have changed. You're a hero to everybody in America. They would love you. You put on the uniform of law enforcement, and it's quite the opposite here. But you're right. We're part of the community. As long as we're part of the community, we should be part of the solution, right? I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I love that. I think it's a great quote to finish on. Um, Todd, like I said at the start, there's always a video intro with the show notes, but people that have gone to now, where's the best places for people to find more about you and to get your books and so on?
Okay. Tourprotection.com is the best spot for kind of looking at who we deal with. So we don't list government clients or executive clients, but with entertainers, they list us. And if they list us, we'll list them. So it's a little bit of a business card. You can also buy the paperback copy of the book in the States. And then, if you wanted to see any of the other books or buy them in e-format, you can get them on the standard platforms, Apple and Amazon and all that stuff. And then you literally Google my name and you'll find it, Todd Fox, and you can find sites and photos of stuff, military, law enforcement, professional fighting, jiu-jitsu competitions, all that fun stuff. And then probably something is new for us, but most people in the world use is social media. On Instagram at Tour Protect, excuse me, at Tour Training. At Tour Training is the Instagram handle. So that's a good spot. And if anybody's not sure of where to find something, go there and reach out via direct message, and we'll reply usually within 2 or 3 days.
Beautiful. I'll put them all in the show notes with clickable links. So if you're listening now, they're there, and obviously they're at the start with the show notes as well. Look, it's been an absolute honor getting to know you, Todd, and from my end, it's great what you're doing. Absolutely brilliant, and on top of that, stay safe in the places you're going to be going and visiting, and all those cool people you're going to be helping as well. So I appreciate you coming on the show. It's been an absolute honor.
No, my honor. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you in person when I get over in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, 100%. That's great. Awesome. Thank you. I'll hit pause and we'll have a quick chat.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, and check out my new project for 2023 at hownottodie.com.au, where I've combined all my Special Forces training and police officer experience to help others. Thanks for watching.